Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Everybody has a story. I'm a firm believer in that. We all have stories. How we got here, what happened in our past, and even just having a couple of conversations with this guy, I've learned so much about his past, which is pretty amazing. He's a renowned architect in the New York metro area, and come to find out, he's also a tennis pro from back in the day, but not just any tennis pro. This guy has played with some of the top players, even connected to presidents and all. And we're going to dig back into that where we left off. John Riggio is back on the program. Hey, John, how you doing?
Good. Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm well. Where did we leave off? I know that you had a contract with a Japanese tennis team, and it was a pretty significant contract. What was the amount of that?
Yes, my contract was sold to a Japanese investor for $100 million.
Wow. So is that actually 100 mil that we're talking about here in terms of the physically?
This is really $100 million was really transaction. It took a long time for that transaction to go through. It took them like 6 months for all the paperwork and the money and everything. So that transaction did go through. But what happened was, while I was playing with the Ross Perot group at the SUNY Westbury campus in New York, is they had a preview of the $100 million contract. And they did this by having the Japan team come and play me right there. And I started to play the Japan team. And what happened was, I was doing amazing against their team. So I had already was playing a lot of matches. I was playing a lot of the ATP matches up to that point, and my winning was already like 1-34. So then, as I played the Japan team, I was doing so wonderful that the manager for the Perot company, he announced that my winning was really 1-60. Like, they didn't win any matches against me. So that was really amazing. So what happened was, with the Japan team, is the matches were televised. They were televised on Japanese television, national television, and local television. And they did all kinds of things, like they put signage around the court. They had ball boys and the line judge and everything like that. So everything looked really excellent. And I was playing them, and I was playing amazing. And I even got the word from my neighbor came out, and he was watching me on television, and he saw me play the Japan team, and he was commenting that I was beating them so clearly on television that they couldn't believe it. And he was really impressed with that. I had to update him with my new tennis name and everything.
John, I want to make sure I have this right timeline. And again, we're talking about when you were in your early 20s, but with this Japanese team. So your contract was sold to this Japanese team, and now you're playing them. So you're not.
What's happening is, I'm still under the contract with Ross Perot, but they have my contract for sale. I think the Japan team who came there, I don't know if everyone was aware that there was an investor that might buy my contract that was from Japan. They were just there to play me. I played so many teams already from different parts of the world. They've come, like the Sutton East and played me. And then at that point, the players were coming out of the U.S. Tennis Center. So now they had the team from Japan come there, and they were playing me. And their team had different nationalities. Some of them weren't just from Japan. Some of them were from other countries. Some of them were from like Indonesia, the Philippines, things like that. And they were also part of this group of tennis players. There was a lot of tennis players. So in the short time they were there, I played so many matches per day. I was playing like 4 matches, 6 matches, maybe as much as 7 matches per day, which was unbelievable. I get there in the morning and play a lot of tennis matches. And so we had this big tournament. It was televised, and I completely beat them. We received a large trophy from Japan, and it had a large trophy, was involved with this tournament. And of course, the trophy went to the Ross Perot company. They own the trophy. And so it was really big. And so I think that was really excellent. I think the only one thing that started to happen with the Japan team was when they realized that I wasn't losing any matches to them. They sort of got a little angry. Like there was a couple people as part of their group that eventually had to get penalized really bad for it. I'll talk about it on a whole nother show.
I want to ask it real quick, John. My memory of the Japanese tennis teams, they're pretty good. You know, it's not like they kind of flounder along. And for you, even historically through the years, for you to beat them is pretty notable.
Yes, yes, it is. I don't know if anyone ever was able to beat the whole team like that. That's so they all came here to play me, and I played amazing. They didn't know I was that excellent a player, and then at some point, a couple of them, one of them was like their captain. Who he was old. He wasn't playing tennis, but he was like a captain or a coach. He was there, and he was sort of getting a little angry. He was getting frustrated that I didn't lose any matches. So he might have orchestrated something to try to stop me from winning.
Mm.
Yeah, a couple of matches after that had to be contested and canceled. I heard that even on television they had a flash on the screen once the ball I hit down the line to win the game, and he all of a sudden called the ball out, and I started to contest it with him. I complained. I said, obviously the ball is like 4 inches inside the line. It is not out. And what he did, he said, okay, you're disqualified. And my neighbor was telling me later that on the screen they flashed on that I was disqualified. And what happened was they had to call to some other people who were administrating the game, and his disqualification did not go through. It was they had to just give me a warning. It did not go through. Then there was a next case when I won the match against one of their players after that too, and they thought I acted too exorbitant, winning, too happy, like jumping around happy, and they wanted to disqualify me, and they did the same thing, saying I was disqualified, and then same thing, I had to go to the administrator, like in a few minutes, and they could not disqualify me. They gave me the same warning, and I also was explaining, they always the other opponents always act the same way, and nothing happens. It's okay. I didn't act strange. I was just happy to win the match, and wasn't doing anything strange to the opponent or anything.
Well, that's
But
probably because of their culture, where they view that as unsportsmanlike, whereby in the States we're happy. You want a match, you beat them. It was it's a major feat, but within their culture, it probably was in their eyes disrespectful, right?
yeah, but I think that's because this was like one or two people on their side. They were getting too frustrated, and I think they were sort of saying to me also that they didn't want to have me win all the games. They're getting a little sad, depressed about it.
Sore
And I think at that point, what happened, because I was really myself there at the Old Westbury courts all alone, and everyone else came from the Japan team. They were all around there. And I sort of had this feeling like either this is maybe like a psychological trick to like train me to play so amazing, like I'm like becoming like hardened steel, that this is, that all of a sudden they're saying they don't want me to win the matches. It was like unbelievable. And what I did was I didn't lose the matches. I continued to play. I did not let them win the matches. And I continued to play the same way.
Mm.
And I was winning more and more matches. And what happened was eventually at that point, I tried to explain to them, usually if a player is playing great and beating everyone, what they do is they usually would have me teach some tennis to the players. So they took to that idea. So it was good. They did take to that idea, and they let me teach some of the Japanese team players that were there. There was a lot of players. I don't know how many there were, but since I was playing like maybe 6 or more matches per day, there must have been a lot of players to play. They just had so many players that I was playing. So there was one player in particular that I remember. He was from the Philippines, and I was teaching him some tennis, and he was learning very fast. He was an excellent student. He was learning very fast, and I taught him a number of times, and he was playing some matches with some of the other players from when they came with the Japan team. and he started to win more matches. And then I was told, like maybe 6 months later, I was told that this player won some key matches over in the Pacific, and they're really happy about it. They were giving me a lot of praise for it, for teaching this particular tennis player, and he was on his way to playing really good. So as far as us playing together and then me teaching them, works good. And usually, as like a tennis teacher, whenever your student advances and wins, it always works to my advantage. I always would get things from that. That would make me more prestigious as a player, as a tennis teacher. Even one of the Ross Perot players, one of the four, was one of my students that they sent me. And I just wanted to point out that the other three had like $100,000 contracts, but this student, since I taught him how to play and he was winning some tournaments, his contract was $500,000. That's really 5 times better than the other players. So I think my lessons were really helping them win some more games. It was making a difference. They were winning tournaments, and they're getting a bigger contract from it too.
Is that something special, you giving lessons, or were you just doing that because you're being very sportsmanlike and wanted to, help others?
Yes, at that point, really, I just did that to them because I just gave them an idea that since I'm really beating everyone so amazingly, that really they should take some lessons from me. That's usually how it works. That's how it works in pro tennis, and they took to that idea, which is very good. And when they learned some tennis, they were happy about it. I think things were going good with things like that.
Interesting. So at this point, we're talking, what age were you? 20 what?
I was 23, nearly 24. I was almost 24 at that point. And what happened is that after I played the Japan team, I was playing more ATP tournaments with the players from the U.S. Tennis Center. And when I told them I played the Japan team, they all got really sort of interested in going to Japan and playing them. They didn't know Japan was open to play. So what happened was later in 1991 and 1992, I think you might, if you were to research it, a lot of players from the U.S. Tennis Center, they went over to Japan and they played them. I think the only difference was they played them after I gave some of them lessons, so some of them were playing better. But they went there to Japan, and they all wanted to play the Japan team. So I motivated the U.S. Tennis Center again for everyone to go travel to Japan and start playing ATP tournaments there. This was a really big thing.
Is the rules for tennis the same internationally, or are there changes? Whether you're in Japan, it could be slightly different. Argentina, slightly different.
There can be slight differences, yes, as far as like each tournament or a series of tournaments. But usually, since the tournaments are going under the ATP, which is like one league, like you say, the NFL or Major League Baseball, the rules are about the same. So they really aren't going to change that much.
Yeah, I never knew that. I mess around, play tennis, maybe once every 3 weeks if I can with my daughter, but that's as far as it goes. I never knew that it was the same rules. Like baseball here is different. If you look at baseball, let's say in the Dominican Republic, it's slightly different. There are changes within that. Even though we have a lot of Dominican players playing on, let's say, U.S. teams, the rules are a little bit different.
Yeah, no, the rules will be almost identical because everything is under ATP league, so the rules are the same for the ATP. If there's any slight difference, it would be so small that it wouldn't affect the league rules.
So where did it go from there for you at this point?
Yeah, there was a few things. What happened is the Ross Perot, when they cordoned off the area, we also were able to get use of the Clark athletic building there at the SUNY Westbury. So all the players that were visiting, they were able to use the lockers, the showers, everything. So it turned out to be a very nice facility there. They had everything available for the players. So that worked really good. And they also, Ross Perot at that point, since I had sort of wondered if we were going to get our own tennis center, they did buy a tennis center. They bought one of the tennis centers on the North Shore of Long Island. And so between the time I was playing at Old Westbury and my eventual move to their new tennis center, my contract was sold to Japanese investors.
Wow.
And so at that point, I did not go over to the tennis center they bought for me. So this is now like the fifth tennis center in my career that they built. This is like that they have a new indoor facility, and I didn't get to play at this facility, even though they bought it and they were ready to use it. This one's I didn't get to play there, but they did buy it for me. So it is another tennis center that I was able to build with my tennis playing.
Wasn't there, John? And by the way, we're talking with architect John Riggio, who had an amazing career as a tennis pro in his 20s before he pivoted over to architecture. Wasn't there a point at that time when you were in your 20s where you got so big they had a stand-in for you?
Yes. So this is really during when Ross Perot Company bought my contract, and the contract was so large at 26.5 million approximately, that this type of entertainment contract is really with all the other big entertainers, like singers, musicians that you would see, and then you might hear that they have a stand-in, someone that looks like them, maybe even would make announcements, sign autographs, things like that. And what happened is one day they had someone come to play me on the tennis court, and I introduced myself, and he introduced himself, and we both said our names are Carlos Scipio. And that's when I got the understanding that this is my new stand-in.
Oh, wait a minute. So they never told you in advance that they were doing that?
No, they just sort of sent
How are
me
you standing
over
there?
to me like he was a player, and it was funny. And then we both said Carlos Scipio, and he was Modron, and then he was the stand-in, and he told me he was my stand-in.
So
It wasn't identity theft. He knows his role, what he's doing. That was his job. And I played a match of tennis. Of course, I won the match of tennis, and I taught him some tennis of how I play and things like that.
so was he
And
a pretty decent tennis player?
yes, he was. He was an excellent tennis player. Yes, it was. And then what happened was
We need to rewind on all of this. So they hire a guy that looks like you, that's a pretty darn good tennis player for the reason, and tell me if I have this correct or not, for the reason of them being able to put you in two places at once, maybe another place in the country so that they can further promote you. Is that the reason why you have a stand?
yes, that's exactly the reason why. Yes, that this is typical of any superstar entertainer that's in the US. Would always have a stand-in like that. It's not strange. I know a lot of the entertainers, like when I'm playing, they usually come to the court and I talk to them, and it's sort of the same idea.
This is a mind blow for anybody watching right now. I'm a stand-in for Brad Pitt. I don't know if you realize that. No, I'm just kidding. But whoever knew that they were doing things like that? It's it's interesting, but at the same time, it's almost a little deceptive that you think. And again, from a distance, maybe nobody would know that's not you, but I get why they're doing it so that they can promote you in two separate places. But that moment had to be so. Did you think when he said his name that his name just happened to be, John, what was it, Ciprio?
John, yes, no, Carlos
Carlos.
Scipio.
Scipio, Carlos Scipio. So when you heard that name, was it like, oh, his name is just like mine, my stage name? Uh, did you think that for a second until you figured out that he was hired as a stand-in?
I thought it was funny, but then he immediately told me what his job is, that he is there as a stand-in for me. And what happened is so he in fact so was at different locations because of that reason. I think that's a standard for any bigger entertainer. That's something that this happened. And I think also this whole thing with like a stand-in, I think very few entertainers, I was told, ever get to this level to have someone like that. This is a really big thing, and this is some main one. And then that is really how this happened. And so it was good. And then anything that was going on with Carlos Apio, myself, and a stand-in was completely good. It was really good. They had all kinds of people, promoters running this whole thing. That was already happening with the advertising, the billboards. Now, so when I'm playing there with the Japanese team, it's being videoed right there in Japan live, and locally here was in the New York metro area nationally. So they are watching me direct, and they are seeing me play amazing. So I think if my neighbors could obviously see I'm beating all the players, these were the Japanese teams and players from the Pacific, the very best players, the number one player, number two, number three, number four. These were their very best players, and they could see me playing amazing. So they were really happy of this whole contract going ahead.
Would that mean that there was a potential, let's say if we, insert name of major tennis player, that there was talking about stand-ins, there was another John McEnroe, potentially, out there. There was another Andre Agassi. There was another Bjorn Borg, and we may not have even known that. Is that
yes? Well, talking to a lot of players and entertainers, I know a lot of entertainers, they all do have a stand-in. A lot of them do have. I don't want to say the exact ones until I really see it,
fair?
Like in a newspaper or something. I'll research it. But yes, a lot of people do have a stand-in.
John, I feel duped, like all of us. Like, if you see, but then again, it's actually not a bad idea, because if you want to put the paparazzi over here, because celebrities getting off a plane and they're taking pictures of them, but the real celebrity is somewhere secluded in the island of Nevis in the Caribbean, and they don't want to be bothered. You throw them off the trail because they're over there. Not a bad idea, technically, for privacy reasons as well. Oh, interesting. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Never knew that, John. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to just reveal that. I think since this whole story is, I'm telling you the story. I think by understanding that I did have a stand-in, I think people could really see the level of success that I was making, that I was really a big entertainer. A lot of entertainers were coming right to my courtside. The only people who were coming to my courtside were people who really had like a $25 million contract too. The top entertainers were coming to see me play at the inner circle there.
Wow. So a couple of minutes left from this point forward in your tennis career. What happened next?
Okay, so from there, the Japan team, they were finished, they left, and I continued to play more ATP matches, and I was winning more matches, playing more people. And at that point, what happened was I was told that the contract with the Japanese investor did go ahead. So the Perot team, they had to return back to Texas. And now if my contract was continuing with Ross Perot, I would just go over to the new tennis center they bought. They did buy the tennis center, and they didn't sell it. I don't know if they still own it today, but it's there. And so I really had to wait till the contract to go ahead. So I had to wait a few months, and it did go ahead. And I was also remembering when the experience with the Japan sponsors went on to, but it went all the way to 1996. They stayed in contact with me to 1996, and I even have some stories. I even ended up going all the way to Hawaii to meet the Japanese contact and things like that. And I think all those I could put on another show, but those were all kinds of different things that took place, and I did meet them in Hawaii to schedule matches and things like that.
Is there anything in the last minute or so we have left, if you were to go back, John, to those days, those tennis days, you're in your 20s, you're barely in your mid 20s. Is there anything that you would have done differently back then?
I think there is. I pretty much was doing everything myself, but I think what started to happen, and it usually was like a cycle that kept happening, was myself having to start to build this whole ATP tennis with my sponsor. And with the Japan team, it was much more difficult. They did not have too many contacts here. And so I think one thing maybe that could be different was maybe to assign more hours per week, maybe to really solve their problem. I assume that these people could solve all the problems very quick, and I get playing right away. But it went on for years and years, all the way to 1996 and past that, and that is what was happening. So
Wow.
they were still trying to help me. I was communicating with them for a long time, and I think some of the things with the Japan team I could say in another show because of what had happened with them wanting to just cheat and try to take some matches, to say they won. So, but I could talk about that at another time. And but that is what had happened. So I think really one thing that would change is maybe assign more hours per week to really solve the problems, not thinking they just got a call and I'm going to start playing right away. I think that is what had happened, and because of course by that time I was getting busy with doing my professional work.
Right.
And then there was also some stories with the money during the Ross Perot. My lawyer Hillary Clinton, she did talk about my individual salary, take home salary. So we scheduled $50,000 take home to start off, and this was in fact going to go to an agent, and the agent was really going to be my girlfriend Yolanda's father, who was declaring that he's an agent for his daughter already. And so I did come through with that $50,000 for him and the daughter and this whole thing. And the reason it had to go to an agent is because if it went directly to me, it would not have. It is in the correct procedure. They're telling me, like having a lawyer and things like that when they went to court and things. It's sort of the same idea. They're really supposed to go to a licensed agent that has like $1 million or more worth of liability insurance, and that's really the correct way to do things. So in fact, this with the $50,000 was going ahead. Ross Perot said it's okay. I think the only downfall was really
You know what? You got to think though, back then we're talking barely mid 90s that, 50K was a lot of money, just, I would triple that in terms of, today's value. So for a guy in his 20s, even at that rate, John, we're out of time, but fascinating again, talking with you. And I just want to say, this is not a stand-in. This really is John Riggio. He is here today with us. And somebody wants to check you out, your website, John Riggio, RIGGIO.com. Looking forward next time we get a chance to talk some more, John.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. We're going to be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.